Father, we are grateful that we can come into your throne room and call you Lord and call you our Father, because of what you have done for us in Christ. We thank you that you first loved us, and even when we were sinners, you made a plan so that we could be brought to you. We thank you for this, and we thank you that you have made it possible for everyone to have a knowledge of Jesus Christ. We thank you that you've included us in that plan, making the message known to us. May your Holy Spirit prepare our hearts that we may be effective for you. Thank you, Lord, for the strength that you've given to this day. We ask that you will help us to order our priorities in such a way that we will accomplish all that you have set for us. And that in the process that your name will be glorified in what we do. This is prayer in Christ's name. Now, as I was looking over these notes again, thinking that there are two or three things that I would say as students for. And I thought, well, maybe I'm going to make a list of all those things I say as students for. One is misspellings and individuals. The second is habits about those things, if you don't want the whole course to go down the drain. It's all about theology, after this. But I like to do that. I like to ruin sermons so you'll get new ones. Yeah, teach class. I remember the sermon that I used to use is when I was a teenager. I was the mission director for our area in the young people. And I like to preach on that passage in Acts where it says that the Lord prevented Paul from going to Asia, and I took that to mean the Orient, and it suggested that the reason that the Western people had the gospel was because Paul went west. And so one day I happened to notice on a map that the Holy Spirit prevented Paul from going west into Asia, the province of Asia. It had nothing to do with the Orient. And I couldn't use that sermon anymore. Praise God. But so often we mislead people when we think that we're doing what is right, and then we find out that we were mistaken. So when that happens, just burn that sermon and get another one that is better. Keep on to those. We have the exploits of Elisha, and compared to those of Elijah, and these two are completely different in their personality and in their tactics. Both of them are what we call non-writing prophets. That only means that we do not have material that they themselves wrote. All of the stories about Elijah and Elisha are written in the third person. Many of the other prophets from Amos on down actually left the sermons, the prophecy that they gave, but Elijah and Elisha do not. Elisha is the low-key person. He doesn't have the confrontation that Elijah does. He does have an ability of extrasensory perception. He is able to know what's going on elsewhere, even though he himself is not present. And we have some excellent examples of that. This will be in 2 Kings. This is where he leads the people to the army to Samaria. Chapter 6. Yes. chapter 6, verse 8, is the king of Aram was at war with Israel. After conferring with his officers, he said, I will set up my camp in such and such a place. The man of God sent word to the king of Israel, beware of passing that place, because the Arameans are going down there. So the king of Israel sat on the place indicated by the man of God. Time and again, Elisha warned the king so that he was on his guard in such places. This enraged the king of Aram. He summoned his officers and demanded of them, will you not tell me which of us is on the side of the king of Israel? And his officers told him that it's Elisha. But Elisha knows, because what the very words you speak in your bedroom. I don't know. Maybe they have spies that are out. But they say here it's Elisha. And then I always chuckle at this next verse. Go find out where he is, the king orders, so I can send men and capture him. If Elisha knows what's going on in his bedroom, he certainly knows this directly. And so they find out he's been broken, and they send an army with chariots and horses to bring him in. And this is that beautiful illustration of where his servant goes out in the morning and sees all of the forces of the Arameans, and is frightened. And then Elisha prays that God will open his eyes so that he can see, and he sees the forces of God all around. It tells us that there are really two dimensions in which we live. And we normally see the one dimension, and we do not see the other. I could have been, if he's not said names, but the Hayden is usually the one that is called. So, Hayden, you say that the other knowledge is working in life. I don't know if I would classify it as word knowledge, or if it's what we commonly call extrasensory perception. Because there are some people who have this ability. And even today we have some people that have that. It's the sort of thing that Dr. Urban would describe as race memory. That is an ability that is coming down from our condition before the fall. It sometimes manifests itself in ways that we can't comprehend. What we had before the fall, and then every once in a while it manifests itself. But this is the ability that would be present before the fall, and ability to communicate with one another at distances, really by mental telepathy. And because there is another place where this also happens with Elisha, is with the Hayden. This in the scripture happened after Naaman, which means Gehazi would have had leprosy by now. Do you think he was still serving even with leprosy? Yes, I think later, in chapter 8, where the king is talking to Gehazi, and he's talking about Elisha, and when the Shunammite woman comes back. And so it looks like that in that case that Gehazi doesn't seem to be bothered with leprosy because he's talking to the king. But I don't know what to think. Well, the leprosy that Naaman had didn't prevent him from talking functions, and it must have been a different type of leprosy. This power that Elisha displays in knowing that the forces of God are there, I think it's something that we need to keep in mind constantly. Because we are told that the angels of God encamp round about those who trust in Him. And so often we don't see that dimension. And I wonder if perhaps what we call heaven is really another dimension in which we are now living, but we are not cognizant of. Lewis in some of his writings alludes to this sort of thing. Where within the same space, time, universe, we have two things going on, and we aren't aware of the other. Spiritual realm is an eternal realm, without beginning and without ending. And that we seem to be somehow caught between that with the beginning and the end, limited by the we can begin to see also how you look at the views of how things look at the UFO, Hayden and different parts, stations across the world. The world is just like some spacecraft that's using this for anything. But if you just see it, you travel on Earth and you never really look at the big picture and see how the Maya beings, the aspects, the generations, and so forth, how could they have this kind of civilization? How could the engineering and other different things that this is for the second period and so forth? How could you have a retrogression in God's face of knowledge? And how could you have faith in that one there and suggest something that's a mighty, the type of intelligence God has put in forth? How does it take sense? Yes, Elisha here shows us a type of ministry and insight that we do not see with Elisha. Whether Elisha had that or not, we don't know. It's just that it is quite evident in the ministry of Elisha. And also with reference to Gehazi, that's where Naaman was healed in chapter 5. After he was healed and he leaves without giving any gift to Elisha, because Elisha refuses. Then Gehazi runs after him. He doesn't want him to get away without paying something. And he says there's a couple of seminary students that have come, and they're in need. He wants some money, and he also wants some garments for them. So he's loaded down, and when he comes back, then Elisha asks, where have you been? He says, I haven't been anywhere. And then Elisha says, well, yes, you were, and didn't my spirit go with you? That's where I get the idea. It looks like it's the extrasensory perception because the spirit of Elisha just went right along with Gehazi while this was happening. Now, you also could call that a word of knowledge or something like that. It looks like he has an ability that he exercises that we do not see in the other spots. I know you got an issue on that. Do you think that had anything to do with Elijah asking the spirit of what it was? That he had his ability? That he had possibly done that? You mean why he even offered this? Well, I guess meaning that since Elijah possessed this ability to understand things like other people are talking and secret, ideas and other concepts. Do you think that was a result of prayer and Elijah? I don't know, because we don't know of anything he did prior to that. So I guess we'd have to say what we actually did, because of the spirit of Elijah is now resting on him, as he's able to do. Elijah died, Elijah didn't, so he didn't do everything that Elijah did, so there was immediately what he said, he found the definition of hell, a double portion of everything, that he did a double portion of everything, and he everything that Elijah was. Because they didn't. Elijah had no death, Elijah had death. And that's his part. And so it's talking merely about the ministry. That has to have happened. So it's the same spirit from this. This is Elisha receiving the inheritance of Elijah. That's more or less saying that Elisha was not really a prophet in his own. He was a prophet in Elijah. Yeah, it's almost like carrying on to Elijah's of Elijah. And that's what he was told to do. Choose life and Elijah to be disrespected. So that's all was on him before Elijah prayed the prayer to be double portion. Yes, that's what that was. He had been designated already. Right. By God, chosen by God as his successor. So he would have been out there with that office. He would have to pray that prayer. That's right. Yes. So whether he would have had the effectiveness that he did. Right. Well, that's correct to say that he wasn't a true prophet. Could be, yes. He had a true prophet as well. No, I'm not saying the double effectiveness. A very effective ministry in which he exercises the same ability that Elijah had. Elijah is the servant of Elijah. And when Elijah is about to go, Elijah wants to succeed Elijah. And by asking for the double portion, that's what he was saying. I want to inherit the same spirit. So he becomes the Elijah of his time. Oh, but Elijah was told to choose Elisha as his successor. But that says nothing about how effective he's going to be. But really, when you see that Elijah's ministry ever ended and have it on that? No, I guess not, because we have it carried on the spirit of Elijah anyway in John the Baptist. And then again, it looks like before the end time, we also have Elijah's spirit. And the spirit that Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration as well. Could you explain how the spirit of Elijah and the Son of a person that died? I see. How that affected the whole family. The firstborn always receives twice as much as anyone else receives. So you divide the property on the basis of the number of heirs. If you have 6 heirs, then you divide it into 7 parts. And 2 heirs and get 2 heirs. Everybody else gets 1. You have 12, like Jacob did, then you'd have to divide it into 13 parts. So the 2 heirs would get 2. And each of the others would get 1. So we went to like a situation
he's there. And even somebody in our family dies now. Do you say that he's there, he has authority, or you kind of like to keep the family there?
Yes, usually that was the case. Because this is what happened with Rachel and Laban, where Laban is assuming the authority in the family. His father perhaps is dead at that time, and so he becomes the one who is the arbitrator, makes the decision. That he's the oldest son.
It's situation that with Elijah and the other prophets that were following when Elijah was getting ready to go up. Those other prophets were also the key portions of whatever was on Elijah because they were under his ministry.
Yes. But Elijah is the leader by virtue of the fact that he received the double portion.
Is that what he was asking for? Leadership over that?
Well, maybe so. Maybe you could put it that way. I haven't ever considered it in that light. Thinking more of he wants to be able to function the same way that Elijah did. And so he asked for the Spirit. Yes, it does place him in a common position.
Does that mean that Joseph was the chief heir because his son usually gets an heirship?
Yes. In fact, both his sons are adopted by Joseph. So you have really 13 sons. Each of them gets one, so Joseph gets a double portion.
It would also make sense, too. It would also be safe to say that since Elijah is president, that he'll be able to do more than Elijah could do. I mean, all that is the builder of that foundation, and also establish the foundation of the building.
That is a possibility, but not on the basis of the double portion. On the basis of what he received from Elijah and then the ability that he himself has.
There was also a number of witnesses to topics that would be witnessing to first between Elijah and Elias, and so there's a double portion, and for God being in control of all of it, so we possibly say that that double portion is the position that would place Elias in, put him in a non-contested position to do the will of God, so that none of the other people would come and say, well, I couldn't so-and-so or whatever.
Right. Yeah, because as soon as this happened, the other prophets then say, the spirit of Elijah rests on Elijah. So that confirms his position in that life. Now the other task that Elijah has been given, but that is carried out by Elijah, is the anointing of Jehu. Jehu, in chapter 9, is a soldier, a general, who is fighting in Transjordan. This is at Ramoth Gilead, which is on the main highway to the east. He is anointed by a prophet sent by Elisha. He is given a commission to wipe out the family of Ahab. Of course, Ahab is dead by this time, but the dynasty continues and called the dynasty of Ahab rather than the dynasty of Omri in the Scripture. Jehu sets out to carry this out to the nth degree by killing the king Jehoram and then Jezebel and Ahaziah, the king of Judah, all of the descendants of Ahab, all of his counselors, and all of his friends. So he wipes out everybody connected with the family of Ahab. He also tries to eradicate Baal worship. He proclaims a feast for Baal, has all of the worshippers of Baal come, and all of them are in the temple of Baal, and then he stations his men around the outside, and says if any of them allow any to escape, their own life will be forfeit. and he slaughtered all the worshippers of Baal. Jehu has an opportunity at this moment to change the whole history of Israel. He has been commissioned by the prophet. He has been anointed by the prophet as king, but he doesn't follow Yahweh. He wipes out the family of Ahab. He destroys Baal worship, but he still clings to those paths that go in Bethel. It's at the same time that we have a woman who takes over the throne in Judah. Her son was Ahaziah. He was killed by Jehu. She then in turn killed all of her grandchildren, with the exception of Joash. Joash has been saved by his aunt and hidden. Athaliah reigned in Judah for 7 years, until Joash was 7 years of age, and then Jehoiada the priest had a coup in which Athaliah was killed and Joash was made king, which means that he's king only as a figurehead, and the real power is Jehoiada. And as long as Jehoiada is alive, there is a good reign for Joash. After Jehoiada died, then Joash turns away from God and becomes an evil king. On the last days of Israel, we see a resurgence of power. First with Jeroboam the second, where he is able to extend the territory almost to the boundaries that were under David and Solomon. He gains control of the trade routes once again. The country prospers, which is Israel in the north. But it's also during his time that we have the great 8th century prophets, Amos and Hosea, both ministering in the north. And the conditions that they discuss would lead us to believe that there are two different classes of people. There is the rich, who are getting richer, and there are the poor, which are being stepped on by those who are more powerful. And Amos has a lot to say about this dissimilarity. The fact that the poor are not being taken care of. Yes. This is Jeroboam II. That during his time that the northern kingdom becomes so strong once again. In the southern kingdom, we also have a very strong king at the same time, and that is Uzziah. And Uzziah is considered a very good king. He does have some problems, again, towards his life, where he presumes upon the priesthood and becomes leprous. So his son then reigns in his stead. But this is just about the end of the northern kingdom. And within another 20 years, Israel will be gone. The last king of the north is Hosea. He is also considered a bad king, as are all of the kings of the north, because he again followed in the way of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat. We are told about the demise of the northern kingdom in chapter 16 and over into 17. Yes, 16 and 17. 16 is basically Ahab, so let's just take 17. In the 12th year of Ahaz, king of Judah, Hoshea, son of Elah, became king of Israel in Samaria, and he reigned 9 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, but not like the kings of Israel who preceded him. We're told that Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, came up to attack Hoshea, who had been Shalmaneser's vassal and paid him tribute, but the king of Assyria discovered that Hoshea was a traitor. So he had sent envoys to So, king of Egypt, who no longer paid tribute. So the Egyptians are trying to get their hold again in Palestine and are offering aid to Hoshea. The Assyrians come and destroy the northern kingdom of Israel. And that took place in 722. And then the whole area is resettled by other people.
We say Jeroboam and Uzziah were strong kings.
Yes.
We're told that before, when the kingdom was strong, it's because there was a power dearth all around them. Is there a power dearth again at this time?
Yes, there is. The Assyrians were weak for a short period of time. Now they're on the move again, and will be for the next 100 years. With the Shalmaneser, then we have the Sargon dynasty which starts. Sargon, in fact, is the one who claims to have destroyed Samaria. And we have a group of kings that are called the Sargonite dynasty after Sargon, including Ashurbanipal and Sennacherib is one of these, and they are very powerful kings. So until about 630, you have the Assyrians who are dominant in that area. Yes. No, they didn't move their own people, they moved other captive people from areas in Mesopotamia. They moved them into the territory. Out of their own, and moved other conquered people in. And this was done so that you would not have them apt to revolt again. Because if you're not living in your own area, there is less likelihood that you are going to revolt. Yes. Mm-hmm. If you wipe them out, they're not there to harden the skin.
You've been supposed to follow these battles over the last 2 times.
No.
And in fact, they're very easy to follow. This is the only part you need for all of this. If you're going to go south to this period. Now, Galilee already has been taken. It's gone. Probably around 650. We're talking about this area south of the Jezreel Valley, which is called Israel. That is what now falls to the Assyrians. Now, the area south of that, including part of Benjamin, was Judah. And they created themselves, that's southern kingdom. And they have not come into conflict with the Assyrians as the northern kingdom has.
Now, the people of Samaria are deported. Most of them are deported to the region of Mesopotamia. And then other peoples are brought in. That is described in the last half of chapter 17, where you have a mixed group now living in Israel. And as a result of that, the Jews who are to the south, tribe of Judah, refuses to have anything to do with that northern group.
The Assyrians moved people from out of their homeland into somebody else's homeland. Didn't the later Babylonians put the Jews back into their own?
No. Babylonians also deported people, not to the extent that the Assyrians did. It's the Persians who allow them to come back. Did they do that for most countries or just for the Jews?
For all countries. The Persians were allowing anybody who wanted to go back to their original homeland. It's a good political move. A whole different attitude on the part of society.
There it was good because everybody was already out of it, and letting them go back in would make them more subject to them.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier about the Hayden. And they have an opportunity to change the history of Israel. But because they're born, I guess, expecting them in some way that you will be able to change the parts of the world. And how does that line up in reference to Exodus 20, where it talks about the giving of commandments and the things of your fathers that which you should
You have following that, this Lord's mercy, 2,000 generations who love me and keep my commandments. So David could have been the first of a new group of people. His problem is, though, that if you are going to worship Yahweh according to the standards laid down by Southern Kingdom, the writers of this, you're going to have to come to Jerusalem to worship. Which means that he is going to tell his people, the proper thing to do is to go to Jerusalem. But that is unhealthy if you're king in the north. So he maintains his vessel, and well, he can't maintain that this time, because that's already gone. He's not ruling over that area. Yes, there will be one again, and there is no longer any king in the world. So we pray as we go to this. Dr. Hayden, we got into the southern, say, blue and the south, and say the north, clean, and Florida. Just as we see, unity to that tribe, wasn't that also being concerned to have that continued, that the individual from the king of the king of that particular tribe continues with their being power. And then aside from that, in terms of the question that he had, as far as how the sin was cast upon, say, one of the different leaders, a good king, son comes up turning bad for a certain period of time. By the same token, they would be Syrians, they themselves, and they would Hezekiah in the north, being a good king and reigned for the amount of time he did, becoming as little Syrianistically as he was, and then in Syria, I think it was the city where when the Syrians had even Hezekiah paying tribute to them, but God sent death to the camp or whatever, and when they woke up, they were all dead corpses and what have you and so forth. So this gave Hezekiah a good king. So he told victory over the Assyrians, and it broke that power that the Assyrians had on the Israelites for many, many years. But until the Lord gave divine intervention in coming in and killing all the Assyrians while they were in the fleet, only then did the Lord decide to free Israel from that persecution and ending the line of bad kings that were coming from the north. It's not quite. Well, not what I'm talking about at that period. Because Hezekiah is considered a good king, but right. His son, Manasseh, is bad, and the Assyrians are bad. But Hezekiah at this time is once in Jerusalem. With the demise of the northern kingdom, then you have attempts on the part of those in the south to extend their territory. This is going to be true of both Hezekiah and Josiah. Both of them have political reforms. Those are religious reforms, usually. But you can't separate politics from religion. So when this area has been taken, and you have other people established there as an Assyrian province, then we have Hezekiah and Josiah later, both attempting to move into this area.
and taking part of it as their own. In fact, Josiah had designs of all of his territory, bringing it back under his rule. He just didn't live that long to see it from around. Now, with Hezekiah, we do have the Assyrians coming in again and devastating 48 of the walled cities, fortified cities of Judah. The only city that he didn't take was Jerusalem. And he tells us that he had shut Hezekiah up like a bird in a cage. That's what he tells us in his record. That sounds better than saying, I was unable to take the city of Jerusalem. We also have an Egyptian account of this that is reported by Herodotus, which says that there were rats that had gone through the camp and eaten up the bowstring and the leather on the heel. Then we have the biblical account, which says that an angel of the Lord went through the camp of the Assyrians and killed 185,000 men. So you put all three together, and you have Sennacherib not admitting anything, other than the fact that he didn't take the city. And the Egyptian and the biblical account indicating there's a plague of some kind swept through the army and killed that many people. So Sennacherib withdrew. And about 20 years later, he was killed by a couple of his sons, whom he had passed over. Esarhaddon had been made king, and they didn't like it, and so they killed their father, Sennacherib.
I know this is going back a little bit. Where is Dan on this map?
It's where Dan is backed up. This is Dan. That's at the extreme end of the north. Bethel is at the extreme south. Here's your Benjamin Plateau. And this would be the southern border of Israel.
So that's where Jeroboam set up the shrine?
Yes. At two extremes, two borders of the country where he set up his throne. And that's not far from Jerusalem. There's Bethel, and there's Jerusalem, and that's about 12 miles.
And he did that primarily to keep the people of the northern kingdom from
So going to Jerusalem, yes.
So I know you probably said but who's in charge of Galilee for the 50 times?
Syria. They turned it into a Syrian province prior to this. And again, for strategic reasons. See, the trade route runs through Galilee. So the Israelites control this, they control the trade. That's one thing that the Assyrians want. The Assyrians started off just making annual visits for collecting tribute. That's all they were doing. They would go out in the springtime and spend all summer collecting tribute. Then it got to the place where they were actually controlling nations rather than collecting tribute. Then they began deporting people. And that then led to mass movement of nations from one place to another.
Yeah, mentioned earlier too that all the kingdoms in the northern kingdom were considered evil cities.
Yes.
And right as David, how would you classify that? I know that he was still an evil king, but I mean, all he did that he did, but the fact is that he's still evil.
That's right. He did a lot of good. He carried out God's command. But the fact that he still kept the shrine stand in Bethel marked him as an evil king.
So in order to be an evil, in order to be a good king in the northern kingdom, it's shrine.
They have to go. Because we're writing it from the standpoint of a southerner. It's like writing the history of the Civil War. Depends on whether you're a northerner or a southerner writing.
When they moved the Jews out of Samaria, did they move them as a group, or did they
just put on a few here, a few here, a few here, a few there. There are several places that are mentioned where they took them. The Hala River is one. The university would be that these people were settled in what is now not Pakistan, where the Russians were fighting. Afghanistan, yes, in the valley that runs to the northeast that goes then into Pakistan. They found it's about 3 million people who are living in that region. They are Muslims, but they follow Jewish practices. They light candles on Shabbat evening. The women always take a ritual bath after their monthly period. They're always doing Jewish things, but they don't know why. It's just that they've been doing that all their life. And he's convinced that these are the Jews who had been taken into exile and then forcefully converted to Islam when the Muslims came. But they still maintain their Jewish practices. They're hoping they will. They are sending yeshiva students into the area to teach them Jewish practices and hoping to bring them back into Judaism. These are part of the diaspora. You have Jews who are, they could be some of the northern tribes, just as well. We have no idea when they first settled in that region. And you have Jewish enclaves living in almost every country in the world. There are Jewish Chinese. There's a province where there are a large number of Chinese that practice Jewish customs. Some of them are, yes, some of them do. Others practice Jewish customs but don't know why. It's just been so long since they were in contact. There are reasons for doing it.
Dr. Hayden, the Jewish Chinese, are they Chinese?
They look Chinese, yes. Mm-hmm.
So the Jewish people were a multiplicity of races?
Probably not, but they have intermingled.
Okay.
And as long as you have a Jewish mother at present time, if you have a Jewish mother, you're Jewish. It doesn't matter who your father is.
I know those that they were bringing from Ethiopia were black.
That's right, yeah.
And when that was stated, then I started thinking about the question that was raised earlier when we were in Genesis, with respect to the dispersion of people and the various races.
You have almost the opposite of that today, where instead of a dispersion, you have all races coming together in Israel, and all of them are with some kind of ethnic connection.
Could it be a cyclic thing that that we're actually seeing, where there was a dispersion, and then now we see it all coming back together, bringing back the harmonious mixture of people into one people?
It's interesting that in Israel today, anyone who is a Jew can claim any portion of his background Jewish, that he can immediately become a citizen of Israel, or she, unless you have become Christian. Then you can't, because then you're considered Christian, no longer Jewish. So it's a very strange thing. A person from northern Manchuria can say, I'm Jewish. So goes to Israel, fine, you're Jewish. And you have all of the rights, privileges, immediate citizen of Israel.
Can you practice Buddhism while you're in Israel?
It probably wouldn't hurt. It'd be all right. It's just Christianity.
What if they're already a citizen of Israel?
That's all right. Yes. If are a citizen already and then convert, then they're okay. But it's those who are coming in from the outside and they're Christian.
You mentioned, this scripture word from the southern side. Who established Jerusalem as a place of worship? Was that a place that God established, or was that a place that David established as chosen as a capital?
David chose it as his capital, probably by having the work of the priest, Urim and Thummim. When he first went to Hebron, he consulted God. Should I go up? Where should I go up? It may have done the same thing with Jerusalem. But once he builds that shrine, that royal shrine, then that begins to solidify worship at Jerusalem.
So that's the thing. The northern kingdom was actually supplying God, because that's the place that he had sanctified.
Yes. But the Samaritans, see, they also have a text which contains the Pentateuch. And the place where God chose to put his name was Gerizim, which would be Shechem. So as far as they're concerned, not Jerusalem, it's Shechem.
Is that factual? Is it true?
Well, it's their side of the argument.
But how does that line up with prophecy? Does it line up with prophecy as far as the prophecy of Jerusalem?
Well, no, because, again, you see, all the prophets, excepting for Amos and Hosea, and Jonah, who doesn't write anything about himself, all the others are from the south. Yes, right?
We talked about Assyria, there's normal practice to make it into an area that took it over. Not only did it repopulate this area, but also be pretty brutal with the leaders.
Yes.
But there's not a record of that there in chapter 17. So maybe a reason why it was like that, or maybe they didn't annihilate the leadership.
Oh, they may have. They may have done that. We aren't told what happened to the leadership at Samaria. We are told what happens later with the Babylonians and the people of Judah when it falls. How Zedekiah, see, has his sons slaughtered before his eyes, and then he's blinded and taken in chains to Babylon. And the people who are responsible for conscripting labor within the city, they're all executed. The high priest is executed. So you have the leadership is basically executed by the Babylonians. And I would say that was true in the northern kingdom as well. As long as Samaria did not surrender to the Assyrians, then it would go hard on the leadership. Yes. Mm-hmm. They didn't surrender. Right.
The place where the temple was built was where the angel of the Lord had stopped and David had offered the threshing floor, right? That's the same place.
Yes. Yeah, the threshing
so that's
floor,
why, pretty much why it was chosen.
Yes.
In that respect.
So, Dr. Hayden, at what point was the Northern Kingdom allowed to have other people come in and to integrate with it? Because that was the point when
the Assyrians brought other peoples in. When they captured the area of Samaria in 722 and brought an end to the northern kingdom, it's at that time that they brought peoples from other places to settle in the area, as we're told in chapter 17. We're also told there that there were lions that were killing many of the people, and they deduced that it was because they weren't worshiping Yahweh. So a priest was brought back from captivity. I don't know why they didn't just go down to the south and pick up one. He wouldn't have to travel so far. But they brought a priest back from the north to tell the people how to worship Yahweh. So they have their own gods. Now they incorporate into that the worship of Yahweh, and you get syncretism. So that's why those people from the south then said, no, you can't help us rebuild the temple because you aren't pure.
Right.
And that begins the division between the Jews and the Samaritans at that time.
In Jesus' time, the Jews had Galilee also, though, right?
Yes.
How did they get back into Galilee?
That's because of the Maccabees.
This was after the Persians?
Yes, in the Greek period, where the Jews revolted against the Greeks and were able to defeat several armies that were sent against them, gain political control and religious control, and then made it hard for anybody else to live in the land who wasn't a Jew.
What was the condition of Babylon? Babylon had been built by Nimrod, right? Flourished until a certain period of time.
Babylon is on and off. Babylon is very strong during the time of Hammurabi, who ruled Babylon. Probably earlier than Moses, from 1800, 1700 in there, so he would be earlier. Babylon was constantly at war with Assyria. And usually the Assyrians had the ascendancy from about 1300 down to 650. 626, the Babylonians revolted, and from that time on, they were independent. In 612, they destroyed Nineveh, and the Assyrian Empire came to an end, with the Babylonians then taking over, until they in turn are destroyed by the Persians in 539.
My wife told me that there was a news going on that Hussein wants to rebuild Babylon.
Oh yes, he does. He has been constructing the Hanging Gardens of Babylon for some time. Yes, he likens himself to Nebuchadnezzar.
Where's he now?
Who?
He's not a builder.
Hussein? No. So that would be far to the north. It would be about where that speaker is. No, I guess we have to go in the other direction, don't we? Since we have an east orientation. That's right. East orientation, it would have to be over in the other direction.
Dr. Hayden,
Yes.
the Urim and the Thummim, did it have supernatural aspects to it? The reason I asked it, I was reading. I think E.W. Kenyon, either Connors, out of Australia, owned the tabernacle. And they were speaking about the Urim and the Thummim, and said that it wasn't that much information on them in reference to how they were used, but it was the conjecture was that there was some type of supernatural aspect, because that's the way God spoke to the high priest through the Urim and the Thummim with respect to major decisions that they had to make. Mm-hmm. So I just thought maybe in your studies and the knowledge of the Hebrew and the other languages, whether or not there was a little bit more information.
No, we don't have any other information. It's just that there was some kind of tool that could be used to get yes and no answers. Question had to be had to be asked in a form that would be yes or no.
I see.
So it's like flipping a coin. See, that's the way I use the Urim and Thummim now. And a student comes in and they ask, which of these courses shall I take? Then I flip a coin. Urim and Thummim. There was an interesting little comment, I think it was in Reader's Digest, my wife was telling me about, where this fellow was supposed to make a decision. He had two possibilities, and so he came to his superior to find out, what should I do? And so he says, well, why don't we flip a coin? The heads would be this, and the tails would be this. And so he flipped the coin, and then he says to the fellow, now, what were you thinking about when the coin went up? He said, well, tails. He says, all right, that's your decision. He says, now go and say that you have made an administrative decision. And he never did show him what the coin said. Okay, that's one way to do it. You're a Methuselah. Now, after Samaria is finished, we have a period when Hezekiah reigns, and then his son Manasseh, who is the worst king that Israel ever had, or that Judah ever had. And then we have Josiah.
Who was the worst king Judah?
Manasseh. Manasseh is the worst. Although in the book of Chronicles, you have Manasseh being taken in chains to Babylon, or to Assyria, rather, to Assyria. And there he repents, prays to God. God restores him to his kingdom, and he has sort of a little reform. But that's not mentioned in the book of Kings. His son reigns immediately after him, and then comes Josiah. And Josiah is considered one of the great kings of Judah. He and Hezekiah both have it said about him that there was no king like them before or after. Almost the same thing is said about the kings. And this is sort of a cliche to say they were very good kings. I don't think you can take it literally, because if you say Josiah was the best before and after, that rules out Hezekiah. And if you say Hezekiah was the best before or after, that rules out Josiah. Both of them are intended. So it's a phrase that is used for both of them. And Josiah's revival is both political and religious. It is at a time when the Assyrians are weakened. He begins his revival in 626, which is very significant, because on that date a couple of other things happen. One is that we have the beginning of Jeremiah. He begins his reign in that year by most calculations. We have the revolt of Nabonidus. Not Nabonidus. Nabopolassar. Nabopolassar revolts. He's the Babylonian. And it is a period, I think there's only one key in here, if you look right. It's a time, you see, when several significant things happen. Josiah can do it and get away with it because of what is happening in Babylon. Babylon revolted, and so the Assyrians have their hands full trying to put down that revolt. Judah is a long ways away, and so Josiah attempts to extend his kingdom to the north. He destroys the shrine of Bethel, which had been prophesied long before that. He also institutes again the Passover feast, which had not been celebrated for a long time. Hezekiah also did that, and the same comment is made about him that it had not been celebrated for years. The Egyptians, though, recognize that their foe is no longer Assyria, but Babylon, since there is a power struggle. Egypt wants as much as it can get, and the new threat is Babylon. So the Egyptians come north to try to help the Assyrians. Josiah does not want this to take place, and so he tries to stop the Egyptian army at Megiddo. Josiah is killed, and that ends then, for all practical purposes, the southern kingdom. Because Josiah was an interlude in the judgment coming on Judah because of the sin of Manasseh. Manasseh was such a sinner that God said, I'm going to wipe out Judah. And then when Josiah came along with his reform, his turning to God, God briefly interrupted the movement towards judgment until after Josiah is out of the way. And then it quickly comes to an end. And Jerusalem then falls in 586 when a son of Josiah is ruling. there are three different sons of Josiah who become king. There is the first one who is taken captive to Egypt by Pharaoh Necho when he comes back in. That is, let's see. Jehoahaz. Jehoahaz is taken to Egypt, and there he dies. And in his place, Necho puts Eliakim on the throne and changes his name to Jehoiakim. Jehoiakim becomes a vassal of the Babylonians just a short time later, in 605. Then he revolts. The Babylonians come. He dies. His son becomes king, Jehoiakim. His son surrenders, and he is taken to Babylon, where he remains in prison for many, many years, but is always considered the legitimate king of Judah. In place of Jehoiakim, another son of Josiah, Mattaniah, is made king, and his name is changed by Nebuchadnezzar to Zedekiah. And he is the last then that rules in Judah. But Jehoiakim, who is in prison in Babylon, is considered the legitimate king. And when the exiles finally come back, it is a son of Jehoiakim who is the governor. Shealtiel, or not Shealtiel, Sheshbazzar. Sheshbazzar is the son of Jehoiakim, and then Zerubbabel is in that line. Yes.
When Nebuchadnezzar came in, he changed the names of these people. Those names, Shealtiel, are those Hebrew names?
Yes.
Because later on, in Daniel, he changes Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach,
Well, they give them Babylonian or Persian names.
They give them Babylonian names. First of all, what's the significance? I mean, why does he change names in the first place?
You change names to show that you have the authority over the person. As God changed the name of Abram to Abraham, or Jacob to Israel. So Necho changes Eliakim to Jehoiakim for that same purpose, and Nebuchadnezzar changes Mattathiah to Zedekiah.
The ones that were in Babylon, though, changed their names to Babylon.
Oh, they're just giving them Babylonian names or Persian names.
Was that also because of their gods?
No, I don't think so. No, I think there you just give them names that can be understood. It's like many of our international students who come here. Now, Abraham Chen, who just graduated, his name isn't Abraham. But most of us can't pronounce his name. And so he takes a name that we can handle. And I would imagine that that's true. When you call others with languages that are difficult for us, after a while you get used to hearing your name so murdered that you answer to anything.
Professor Hayden, could we assume here in regards, say, back to when David established Jerusalem as a neutral turf, to draw the time because it was impenetrable in regards as far as no one being able to capture it, and over a period of years until Manasseh, and say the idolatry and the killing of the innocent blood and everything else. All then was Nebuchadnezzar able to capture and destroy Jerusalem, and regardless of what leader that was placed over, even if they did, say, go along with Nebuchadnezzar and then later try to portray them, that effect that when God had turned against the idolatry that existed, no matter what, he still would not allow Israel to have victory over Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar, because he was the only individual that militarily has taken Jerusalem. So that means that if that's the particular case, then that the only reason that all the other leaders, like David on down to the line, who said Jerusalem being the fortress that it was, really wasn't. It was God that was protecting.
God is protecting our city. And it was well fortified. But when God wanted to turn it over to the Babylonians,
Nebuchadnezzar is the only person shown through history to where it continuously kept taking.
we'll deal with the chronological puzzle next time. And there is a chronological problem when you try to work through these kings. It looks very simple, but if you ever sit down and try to lay out a chronology to put these kings in order, you'll find that it is very, very difficult, and the figures just don't add up right. But there is a solution to that, I believe. Oh, by the way,
I'm saying that as if I have perfect warrant to. How can I not be guilty of circular reasoning just like Kierkegaard? You see, the way that I approach theology, human reason comes to authority. You begin to think by listening to a teacher. The teacher teaches, the student listens, so that human learning is really, in my perspective, an exercise in circular reasoning. But how can I be justified in saying that about the Scripture? Roxanne?
Philosophy and values that say my moral ethics is going to be governed by some set of rules. You have to have something solid, and so you're going to foundation.
Jesus Christ has told me that I'm saved by grace through faith. I don't have to obey the law to be perfect in the law. I don't have to match some high standard to be saved. All I have to do is believe on Him, and I'm saved by grace through faith. And your Bible doesn't teach that. And I'm sorry, but I'm a sinner, and I've got to have somebody who's going to save me by grace, not by works. And if you read the Book of Mormon, you'll find that's true. There's a different system of salvation in it from the Word God.
Well,
That is much affected modern Christianity, and that is process philosophy, also known as process theology. Process philosophy or process theology. Now, this is primarily represented by the University of Chicago. As a matter of fact, back in 1973, the United States government did a study called Graduate Theological Education in America. And out of the schools they studied, which were all the large schools, the University of Chicago Divinity School came out as number 1 in the country in terms of the criteria they used. I'm talking about number of volumes in the library, faculty-student ratios, just their little criteria. Of course, there were a lot of them that were up there. But the University of Chicago Divinity School, way back when, I don't know how it is today, but it continues to be one of the most important divinity schools in this country. Well, what is taught at the University of Chicago Divinity School is process theology. That's what they're known for. And what process theology teaches is a way of understanding God which helps you deal a little bit more satisfactorily, they feel, with the problem of evil. Now, in the world of theology, this whole question about evil, the problem of evil, is known as theodicy. So if you're going to discuss theodicy, you're discussing the theological question of where evil comes from, how evil begins. Well, process theology, some names that are bandied about, would be Hartshorne, Whitehead, that group, and then process theologians themselves, who I'm not extremely familiar with. But process theology or philosophy has an answer. They feel they have an answer to this whole question of evil in the universe. They would say that change is the key to understanding reality. Change is the key to understanding reality. Change is the key to understanding reality. Now, how does that help in understanding God and the things that's going to happen to us? Well, they make a little sidestep. Just make a little adjustment. According to process theology, this classical Christian view that comes out of, the Reformation and even before that God is some almighty power that's sitting out there in control of everything. You have this picture. May I give you again that Westminster Catechism definition of God. God is a spirit, infinite, eternal, and unchangeable in His being, wisdom, power, holiness, justice, goodness, and truth. Now that's pretty big. That's pretty whopping big. You see, all process theology says is that God is just not quite that big. The big problem with theology, they would say, is that you've made God to be just a little bit more powerful and a little bit bigger than He really is. What process theology teaches, taking a cue from process philosophy, is that God actually grows Himself in time and space. He is not omnipotent. He doesn't know everything. But He, like we, only on a grander scale, is adding to His own knowledge every day in accumulated cumulative manner. So the reason you get hit by that Mack truck is because you just didn't happen to be lucky. That's a horrible illustration. Forgive me for that, because some of you might have had some accidents or something. I don't mean to be light about that. But the point is, we do experience evil in this life. How do you handle that? If you're a pastor, that's one of the first things you face. As a pastor, I've had to have funerals for children out in little miniature caskets being laid into the ground. We all go through those things. You have people who die. Process theology would say the reason that happened certainly doesn't mean it was the will of God. And it doesn't necessarily mean there was something wrong with you. All that means is that God just isn't quite as all-powerful as we always thought He is. There are elements of things that happen in this world that God just doesn't have any control over. And they afflict His people. But God is growing. He's adding to His own knowledge every day as His church grows and as His people grows. And someday in the future, God's knowledge and power will reach a point at which it will become absolute, and we will have the kingdom of God brought in. Now that is a very evangelical presentation of how process theology might work. I'm being very kind there. One of the reasons I'm being kind is because I don't pretend that I know a lot about their position, and I'm not going to stand up here and pretend to be an authority. But I do know at the very bottom, the assumption is that God Himself is in process, and that explains the existence of evil. Where did evil come from? Because something happened that God was not able to prevent. And you've got to admit it does give Him an answer, doesn't it? And before I take a question, let me say I will tell you how I dealt with that, just in case you're wondering. When you walk into someone's house and their loved one has just died after being together for 30 years, or they've lost a teenager in an automobile wreck, I'll tell you the answer I give them. I have an answer. It's I don't know what happened. Either that or I don't say anything. And in my time of remembering this, I think the best I could remember is I would just simply put my arms around them and say, I'm sorry. But quite frankly, I didn't try to give them any answers. I really didn't feel like trying to give them any answers. So, and there comes a point, you see, at which the Christian faith is not hostile to reason, it's not contrary to it, but it passes beyond it. It wouldn't be much fun if all of Christianity were circumscribed within our ability to reason. You see, there are certain points of Christianity where you must take almost a Kierkegaardian statement. Almost. You stand at that open grave, and the question is, are you going to believe or not believe? If you don't mind if I philosophize for just a moment here. For example, one of the outstanding pastors in our church, that doesn't mean, that he's any better than anyone else, but he certainly is an outstanding pastor. Outstanding Christian leader is Paul Laverne Walker. He pastors the Mount Perrin Church of God. It's a huge church in Atlanta, Georgia. And he's, a very fine reputation as a minister and a pastor. Well, his son had just passed about his 21st or 22nd birthday, had just finished a degree in psychology, and was just going to join the faculty at the school college. Here he was, the son of one of the most famous pastors in the whole denomination, someone whom you probably could see on TV at any given time. And he's just been married not long, and he's got a whole future in front of him, and he's going back from the college in Tennessee to Atlanta, Georgia on the highway, and a drunken driver hits him. His life is taken. And when they had the funeral service, Paul Laverne Walker and his family asked that they sing God is a good God, and they just stood around the grave singing God is a good God. Well, that is a very striking illustration, I think, of the attitude that some people can have in the face of it all. Is your faith radical enough? Is your faith totally radical enough to accept your loved one being taken? Can you really stand at that grave and still have a victory? And still claim the goodness of God? But to explain how, I cannot. I can't. But it's at that point that Christianity really becomes living and dynamic. And I'll ask you one more thing. Have you ever actually given God the chance to say no? Well, He must love it if someone gives Him that option. Because sometimes it will appear in our lives, when we go through our valleys, it will appear He said no. I'm reminded of C.S. Lewis. I've got to stop. I have one note. C.S. Lewis wrote this little book called The Problem of Pain. You got to read it one time. C.S. Lewis, tremendous, The Problem of Pain. C.S. Lewis was a tremendous Christian apologist. Who hasn't heard of C.S. Lewis, right? Screw tape letters, the whole thing. Lewis lost his wife. He loved her with all of his heart. He lost his wife. He was surrounded by grief. I'm thinking it was indeed the situation where it was the companion and not a child. I think in Lewis's case, it was his wife that was taken from him. He was overwhelmed. And in this book, he tried to address this problem. It's entitled Problem of Pain. And he says, you say that God is there. You say that He's there. But when you need help, you go there and you call on Him, you'll find the shutters are barred, the door is not open, and if you knock on the door, no one answers. There's nobody there. He will not answer. And here's one of the world's greatest apologists, who spent his life defending many of the things we believe, who experienced a time of tremendous aloneness and solitude and darkness, you see. So, to me, I would look at process theology I would try to, in my own life, say, what happens to me is in some way above my knowing. God knows. God somehow is in control of it all. And I will trust Him. He's not limited. He's unlimited. He's not what's the opposite for all-powerful? He's not finite. He's infinite. He's not just partially powerful. He's omnipotent. I agree with all of that. And even in that, I still have faith in Him, even if it looks like He's turned that omnipotence against me. And He's going to crush me off the fly, you know. He must love people who respond like that. He must love them. You've got to stop this. But sometimes, you know, like you ever have a little dog? And you put the little dog in a box when you leave, you know, and he's all shut up in a little box. And you come home and he's happy to see you. He doesn't yell at you about being put in the box. He just wants to see you. How God must love people who are still happy to see Him, even if they've been put in a box all day long. They don't have to have anything. They just have to have Him. That's all they want. Oh, I tell you, God help us to have that kind of faith. Now you see, you got me going. And then I get started on that. But process philosophy, to me, is not really that valid. Any comments or questions? Were there a couple that I... something else. I'd like to ask you how you're going to go about finding your own theology. How are you going to go about finding your own theology? I'll only go 2 or 3 more minutes here. I'll give some preliminary comments, and then I'm going to give about 7 or 8 steps that you can use to find your own theology. Okay? First thing I would say, a very profound statement, the modern scene is complex. It's a great teaching. The modern scene is complex. Took me a long time to think that one up. The modern scene is complex. If you read, for example, in your text, around page 59 or so, you'll see mentions very different options, etc. The person can believe in, paths they can follow. Secondly, previous movements may not always be adequate. Previous movements you may not find to be always adequate in that you may come out of backgrounds where you do not have the certainty you wish. For example, if you, these days we talk about the new hermeneutic, a new way of looking at the Bible. It's the idea that the reality of faith does not lie in the area of historical facts. You know, it doesn't have to be related, that kind of thing. And you can be very troubled sometimes by having being raised in churches that have a very, very different approach to Scripture, to truth. So sometimes some previous statements may have failed you. So then how should you go about finding your own theology? Well, here's my first point. First, don't discard classical systems just because they are old. Do not discard classical systems just because they are old. Sort of interesting, there's a little quote that Erickson makes here from a more liberal, not maybe liberal in the bad sense. Well, let's see, who is it? It's Cursup Lake, who was sort of criticizing the fundamentalists. So whatever he wasn't a fundamentalist. My point is, don't discard classical systems just because they're old. There might be something good in them. But on page 65 of Erickson's text, he has a little quote from Cursup Lake, who's criticizing the fundamentalists of his time. Here's what Cursup Lake says. He says, "No, the fundamentalist may be wrong. I think that he is. But it is we who have departed from the tradition, not he. And I am sorry for anyone who tries to argue with a fundamentalist on the basis of authority. The Bible and the corpus theologicum of the church are on the fundamentalist side." So, if you are having a difficult time finding your own theology, just maybe you ought to look a little bit more back at, I would say, even fundamentalistic systems. I'm not a fundamentalist, incidentally. But it's not because, as I said probably in the first class, I disagree with fundamentalist theology. It's because I have a different view on how the church should relate to the world than you find in fundamentalism of the Bob Jones University type, or I would say I would even differ probably from, what's his name, Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church? The guy that always preaches in his academic robe, Kennedy. Yeah, in other words, at that point, even though he and I might believe many of the same things right down the line, at that point, it's a sociological thing more than it is a theological thing. But having said that, let me just say, don't discard classical systems just because they're old. There's a lot of truth in some of those things. Point number 2. Follow a logical order in constructing your view. You say, why do I have to follow a logical order? Because I'll fail you if you don't. Follow a logical order in constructing your view. Follow some type of a logical order in constructing your view. In other words, theoretically, I don't know, every time I say this I wonder if it's the truth, but theoretically speaking, biblical theology should precede your systematic theology. It hurts me to say that. It bothers me. I was telling Dr. Irvin the other day, I was saying to him, I said, this theology, this systematic theology, I said, after a while, all these systems get to be about the same, and I said, I wonder if I should, I sort of envy you guys in Old Testament, New Testament, doing biblical theology, because you can look at it from the standpoint of studying the text, because you can study that text, and it seems like it never ends. And he says, that's true. He says, that's a good thing for you to do. And I said, yeah, but I said, what would happen if I found some of those words and they didn't fit into a system or something? And he said, that's the point. so I look up to Dr. Hayden in that. He always cheers me up and sort of goes me along to higher heights. But technically speaking, biblical theology should precede systematic theology. It makes me grit my teeth to say that. Because a lot of biblical theology, by the time you get to the systematic level, is so sabotaged anything that really, can be believed. I think what I'm implying is, if you are, how am I trying to say this? If you are devout, if you have the right epistemology, if faith precedes reason, then I think biblical theology can precede systematic theology. That's just another way of saying that you shouldn't decide just what you believe without regard to the Bible. You should let the Bible formulate or form your belief system. And then I'm going to give you one more point, and then I'm going to call it for today. Third, establish the proper skill of exegesis. Establish the proper skill of exegesis. And all that means is you should have some awareness of how to interpret that book. You can't just interpret it all allegorically. What does the Bible mean? I say again, do I believe in the literal meaning? I believe in the literal meaning. 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 I believe in the literal meaning.